Yeah, over to you,
Good
Martin.
morning. Good morning. We're still waiting for a few more to join. But it is 10:01, so I think we'll make a start and we'll let everybody else join. I will start us off with karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mākina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai. E hia ke ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, tihei Maori ora. So, morena everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on embracing disability as a strategic advantage in hospitality and tourism, brought to you by Ringahora in partnership with New Zealand Disability Employers Network. Thank you for your time attending this session. For those who don't know me, my name is Martin and I'm the Industry Engagement Lead at Ringahora, looking after hospitality and tourism sectors. We are privileged to have Phil Turner, the Chief Executive of New Zealand Disability Employers Network, with us this morning. Phil will share some useful tips and strategies for unlocking the potential of New Zealand's disabled community as both valid customers and untapped talent, particularly in the tourism and hospitality sectors. So the session will cover a range of things, such as tackling skill shortages by accessing a capable, motivated, and often overlooked talent pool, boosting innovation and team performance, enhancing brand reputation, creating culture of belonging, and very importantly, driving profitability. So what I'll do, I will hand over to Phil.
Kia ora, thanks Martin. So very quickly, kia ora koutou, ko Danny Nong Te Manga, ko Yarati Awa, no te whenua moi moi e hao, ke tamaki toko a kaienga, ke ko Turner Toko whānau, ko Phil Toko Inoa, ko Chief Executive New Zealand Disability Employers Network. So all of that in short, some of you may have picked up that I actually originate from over the ditch. I grew up in Melbourne, but I'm rapidly approaching having spent half my life in New Zealand and hold both passports and have been living here my whole entire working life, or pretty much my whole entire adult life. And so it's a real pleasure to be here today and to talk to you in and around this topic. And to start with, what I'd like to share with you is the vision of the New Zealand Disability Employers Network. Our vision is New Zealand organisations realise the true potential of disabled and neurodivergent people to the benefit of everyone. And that means that we're not going to ask you to do something that doesn't make commercial sense, because that wouldn't be to the benefit of you. But we want to make sure that what we're actually doing benefits disabled and neurodivergent people, benefits you as the employer and the business owners and the runners of your organisations, and then finally benefits society and everyone else at the same time. And so we're going to today explore that a little bit. I've got some slides to run through for you, talking a little bit about what do we mean by disability, why disability is good for our organisations. But then I actually want to spend some time sharing some stories with you, but finally actually getting into a conversation. I don't want this to be a talk fest where I just talk at you. I'm really hoping that what we can do is build on a little bit of a base that I'll create, but then actually exploring your particular issues and your particular questions to make sure that this becomes a really valuable session for everyone that's taken the time out of their day to attend. So thank you for being those people that have taken the time out of your day to attend, and please do put the questions into the chat. Please do use the facilities that are available to go there, and we'll see what we can do and bring forwards. If anything pops up as I'm presenting, please don't hesitate to put it in. I'd rather, if it's a question for you, it's probably also a question for somebody else. So thank you very much again. So what I actually want to start with is just exploring very quickly about what do we actually mean by disability, and looking at some of the statistics. I just need to set this groundwork with you in order to get going. So first of all, at the moment, officially, it's about 1 in 6 people, or 17% of New Zealanders, are disabled. That represents about 851,000 people in our environment. Globally, the official stats are 16%, or 1.3 billion people. And interestingly enough, it spreads right across the age. So we're looking at about 10% in that 0 to 14 age group. In the 15 to 44-year-old age group, we go up to 12%. And then it rapidly starts to increase from there at 17% for the 45 to 64-year-olds, and 65-plus-year-olds are at 35% of the population. Interestingly enough, we did change the way as a country that we measure these statistics. So some of you may have heard the 1 in 4 people that we used to talk about, and that is still not irrelevant. We just used to measure it in a slightly different way, but that doesn't mean those people with their needs have disappeared. It just means that we've changed the bar a little bit on the official measurements. So when you did your census, you were asked the questions like these. Every single one of us that did a census would have been asked, do you have trouble seeing even while wearing glasses? Do you have trouble hearing even when using a hearing aid? And you were given 4 options in answering these questions. You were asked, did you have no difficulty, some difficulty, a lot of difficulty, or were you unable to do it at all? So the interesting thing about this is the a lot of difficulty and an unable to do it all was where you would qualify to be even explored to see whether you were disabled. Now, there were a whole heap of other domains that are covered within disability other than just the 6 that I've shown on the 2023 census questions. And what happens is the information that's taken from this answering in these ways is then taken forward to what's called a National Household Disability Survey. And so that we've got a little bit of a challenge here in the fact that we actually look at it and we go, a lot of difficulty or unable to do it all. Now, what I want to do for you here is actually look at the statistics of the people that answered some difficulty or higher. So if you were asked the question, do you have trouble seeing even whilst wearing glasses? Actually, nearly 1 in 5 people, 19.3% of the population, said they had at least some difficulty seeing even whilst wearing glasses. Walking and climbing steps. Oh, so what I should have said back there was 4% of the population ended up being officially disabled. That is, they had a they are either blind or low vision, and the vision impairment meant that they had a lot of difficulty or were unable to do it all. But then a further 15% went on top of that to say that they had some difficulty. And that's a really interesting one. So I'm just going to close the blind. I'm noticing that I've got a bit of a shadow on me. There we go. That's going to do a little bit better. And so that 15 odd extra % of people do benefit from the changes that we make and what we do around disabled people. In walking and climbing steps, it was about 2 to 3%. It goes up to 14.4%. Washing or dressing goes from 1% to 5.1%. Hearing's an interesting one. 1% of the population are officially deaf or hard of hearing, while 14.1% of the population have trouble hearing or have at least some difficulty hearing, even whilst wearing hearing aids. 1% communicating are officially disabled in communicating in their native chosen preferred language. So New Zealand Sign Language users, unless they have some sort of a mobility impairment that affects their dexterity, would not be counted as having some difficulty because they can communicate absolutely fine with each other. But the 5.9% of people actually have trouble or difficulty, at least some difficulty, communicating in their own preferred language. And then remembering concentrating is also something to look at. And that is, now this one is a bit hard. In the official statistics, it's between 2 and 4%. I haven't seen a combined statistic that brings them both together in how it ended up. And so it's 2% for remembering and 2% for concentrating. But if we add those together, it's somewhere between the 2 to 4% of people have difficulty in that. However, if we add the people with some difficulty, it goes all the way up to 19.4%, or 1 in 5 of us again. Now, interestingly enough, if we take that, and I've been privileged, last week we ran our conference, the Disability Inclusive Pathways Conference. We had Whaikaha, the Ministry of Disabled People, involved, and we got a few extra statistics. So these are the statistics I've been talking about for a few months now. These extra statistics are really interesting on top of that. So functional difficulties is where somebody could be disabled. And if we look at the working age population, acknowledging that people work beyond 65, but 15 to 64 is the age group here, we are talking about 46% of the population have at least some sort of a functional difficulty that creates, or a functional difficulty that creates at least some difficulty with them operating in their lives and going forwards. Think about this not only in your customer base, but also the fact that this exists in your workforce. So 46% of New Zealanders have at least some difficulty in some functional domain area. Now, interestingly enough, when we take that across the whole adult spectrum, including things, it goes all the way up to 52%. So over half of adults in New Zealand have at least some difficulty in a particular area. So that's a really interesting way and thought of looking at it. And we need to be really careful here to say it is some difficulty. It doesn't mean they have a lot of difficulty. But the argument I'm trying to put forward here, when we look at these figures, is to say when we build for the 20% of the population that have needs, we benefit the 100%. Where if we only think about the way we set up our work environments, our environments for customers, our environments for everything, if we build for the 80% of people, 80%, then we only benefit the 80%. But if we build for the 20%, we benefit the 100%. So we are talking about how do I actually get you to think a little bit differently in order to increase your productivity, to increase your return, and to basically be better businesses and able to work better. Now, what I'll do from here is I'll go into exploring some of the benefits and some of the areas around that and some of the challenges I know exist within your sectors. But before we do that, I just want to pause here and ask, does anyone have any questions about those statistics? Feel free to type them in. I'm not sure whether you can come off camera in the view that we've got. You might not come on camera in the view that we've got, but feel free to put your hand up or do what you can, and we'll see what we can do if there's any questions about those earlier statistics that I've just presented. Just give people a second to type in. No, I'm obviously very good at presenting them and putting the view across. Marina, did you have any questions or anything? Did anything pop up for you?
I think maybe one of the questions I definitely have is what you've just mentioned, and that's in regards to, do we have stats around productivity and the return for people with disabilities when they are in roles? How do they swing productivity and the return?
So I'll talk a little bit about that in the following piece. So absolutely, you're right on it. There's no specific real tangible things where I can say, oh, this is just going to change it. What I can say, for instance, is one of the reasons we tend to say that disabled people shouldn't be employed is because we're worried about health and safety. Oh no, they won't be safe in their environments. Well, the truth is it actually flips the health and safety outcomes. Disabled people are 1/5 less likely to have accidents in the workplace because they're professionals at managing their own needs. And they actually, on average, organisations that increase their disability confidence and bring it into their organisations increase their health and safety outcomes by about 7%. And those are some figures that came out of ACC a couple of years back. So that unto itself is a really interesting one. We tend to say, oh no, we couldn't do it, we couldn't keep them safe. Well, actually, they help to keep everyone safe and bring the whole thing forward. Anyone else got any questions? Nope, I'll keep moving then. Okay, so just jumping through. I jumped a few slides there. I'm just going to make sure I didn't skip anything. Nope, all good. So why disability is good for our organisations? Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge some of the challenges that you're facing in both the hospitality and retail sectors. So cost of living pressures, cash flow constraints, probably created by reduced turnover, staff retention, burnout, and difficulty attracting high caliber candidates. And I'm going to come back to those at the end of this little section of the presentation. But before we do that, I'll just point out that in hospitality, you do have chronic staffing gaps, and acknowledging those chronic staffing gaps that you've got through there, and talk about the fact that 80,000 skilled employees are actually leaving every year. And that's what New Zealand's been experiencing for the last few years. And that obviously impacts the talent pool that you've got. But the interesting thing is disabled people aren't leaving at the same rates and actually have a lot of talents and a lot of capability. We just don't necessarily know and understand how to unlock it. So if we're saying up to 1 in 5 working age New Zealanders have an access need, well, actually, if we included that some difficulty, we're actually talking about 48% of working age New Zealanders. We're going to become better at engaging with individual stakeholders when we start to understand and bring this forward. This is where the money sits. Now, interesting for tourism, I know we were exploring this a while back about the different blocks of age groups for tourism. I need you to realise that the 65 plus year age group fits in disability becomes more and more prevalent at that 32-33% rate. The old official statistic was 59%. So when we start looking at that from that point of view, if we're looking at tourism, there's obviously we're going to become better at engaging with that. And disposable income tends to sit in that age range as well. Most of the time, not always. At least in the 45 plus range. Strategic benefits, changes for disabled people often benefit everyone. And what I'm talking about here are the traditional reasons. These are the arguments you may have heard before and haven't really always landed. So that's all right, I've got more. But changes for disabled people often benefit everyone. This is the where I was saying before, if you build for the 80%, you serve the 80%. If you build for the 20%, you serve the 100%, because you're building systems that will work for that minority, but you're actually benefiting the other percentage of people that have some difficulty in that area as well. So you're going to be able to attract and keep good staff when you're actually set up and working in this way. You're going to have the benefits of a diverse workforce, such as increased innovation. Now, we joke in the sector, or I joke in the sector, about the fact that if you want a good risk manager, hire a disabled person, because they manage risk all day about their disability out in society, because society is not built for them. So if you want to learn from them and you want to innovate from that level of perspective that isn't otherwise available, then you have to have them in your team. And you have to get that through. And that can be a really scary first step to take, saying we're going to bring them into our team. We're not sure how this is going to work. We're not sure we can keep them safe. We can go through all of that. And I will attempt to address some of those concerns as we move forwards. There's obviously the social and ethical benefits as well. We're going to be improving social equality. We're taking that moral stance that reflects society's changing values. We're improving the lives of disabled people while leveraging new or under-tapped markets. If you're in retail, disabled people still need to wear clothes. Disabled people still need, if you're in FMCG, they still need to eat. It's all there. It's going to tackle discrimination and exclusion and create an inclusive business environment as well. Now, I'm not going to labour this point or these points other than to talk about the fact that there is law that sits in behind this as well. So there is the Human Rights Act. Discrimination is a part of the Human Rights Act, and you know what? I'll just give you the history of why you don't hear about this with disabled people. It takes on average 8 years to take a discrimination case through the Human Rights Tribunal. And the cases happen, but they never make it to the tribunal because the lawyers get involved. The lawyers realise that they're in hot water, that the organisation's in hot water, and quite often around the human rights cases, it actually gets resolved at mediation, and cash does change hands. When an organisation has been discriminating in the way that it delivers its products, in the way that it does whatever it's doing, its services, delivers its products, its services. I know this because I have been in cases where that has happened. And that's all I can say, because what happens after that, the lawyers also attach a confidentiality clause to it. And so that's one of the biggest travesties of the way our law works, in the fact that it sends everyone to mediation first, but what that doesn't allow is for the cases to build public awareness that they actually happen. So I don't like using the legal as the strong arm into getting you to do things, because there's so much more benefit for it. But you do need to be aware that discrimination cases happen. Discrimination cases end up with lawyers involved who probably make more than the complainant in regards to it. But our system is a little bit broken and it never goes into the public eye. And that creates a little bit of a lack of awareness. If you were in Australia, the Sydney Olympics back in 2000 were a landmark case, and so were Coles Myer from the retail point. They had a huge case taken against them. That was successful and helped bring awareness. If you were in the States, there's cases like Domino's Pizza, and further afield, other countries all have their landmark cases. I don't have a landmark case in New Zealand that I can refer you to, because it's all solved back in the other areas. But do rest assured that it does happen. I'm going to skip the next couple of slides because I'd rather talk to you about the employment benefits. So what I want to talk to here, and this is a Deloitte Australia survey, found that the majority of workers, disabled workers, are as productive or more productive than their non-disabled peers. I believe it was 90%. Again, we tend to think of disabled people as being not as productive. Oh, well, they'll have a lower productivity. Well, there is a certain percentage of the disabled population that would fit that mold. The vast majority don't. I'll say that again. Whilst there is a certain percentage of the population that would be less productive, the vast majority are as productive or more productive than their peers. Most disabled workers have better attendance and fewer health and safety issues. So I think I talked earlier in when I was presenting, sorry, I presented yesterday as well, so sometimes I get a little bit confused as to what I said in which presentation. But better attendance, so less sick leave, and fewer health and safety issues, and actually help to boost the health and safety outcomes. And hiring disabled workers, I call this one out a little bit. Hiring disabled workers usually costs less than hiring non-disabled workers. I have to add a caveat here. When you add in the supports and funds that are available. And there are supports and funds available to make it a success. But I think if I was honest with you, it may take, in some instances, a little more time to work through it. And so overall, it works out about even. I don't think you're disadvantaged in hiring disabled people, but I'd rather call it and be honest than to try and pull the wool over your eyes. Now, the next one is Gen Z.
Oh, Phil, can I ask you a question?
You can definitely ask me a question. I'll go back to the previous slide. There you go.
Yeah, just in regards to the better attendance. So some of those stats are what you're referring to. Does that correlate to, like, if someone with a disability is employed, is there a higher level of loyalty, of service that kind of translates into better attendance and things like that? Is that where it comes from?
Yep. So they actually take less sick leave on average. Now, there will be exceptions on all sides of the equation, and you'll have had different experiences with different people, but on average, they take less sick leave. So they show up to work more often. So they have better attendance in that sense. There is also a higher retainment rate, which I was going to bring up in response to some of the industry's specific challenges that are facing. So that will come up real soon. But yeah, it is that less sick leave. It's that less, it's that actually I'm really grateful to be here and I want to be here. Now we have underemployment issues with disabled people where organisations get them in and they stay in an entry-level role or at that role because the organisation doesn't know how to move them forwards because their career path is going to be a slightly different version. And that can create challenges. And that's some of the work that we at the New Zealand Disability Employers Network do with organisations to help them move that forward so that they can unlock the full potential, remembering back to that vision that I had at the start of New Zealand organisations realise the true potential of disabled people and disabled and neurodivergent people to the benefit of everyone. Now, I haven't in this slide deck spent time exploring what we mean by disabled, but I want to make sure that people aren't thinking just a wheelchair user and a blind person and a deaf person. Disabled has such a broader range than that. Neurodivergence, some neurodivergent people wouldn't like to call themselves disabled. That's absolutely fine. But in the model that we use, they would be disabled by what happens in society and by the decisions that we make. I can explain a little bit about that if that becomes a point of interest later on, but what I will do is continue to go through these slides and just present, and then we can explore models of disability, how it all comes together and bringing it forward. So what I want to talk here is Gen Z. So estimated 30 to 35% of the workforce by 2030. I'm going to suggest in hospitality and retail that that's likely. Yes, you may write a question, Faye, absolutely. That hospitality and retail will actually see a larger percentage of the workforce than 30 to 35% of Gen Zs, just because of the nature of your workforces. But Gen Z come with a really interesting thing. They don't work for people who don't reflect, or organizations that don't reflect their values. So to win the hearts and minds of Generation Z companies and employers will need to highlight their efforts to be good global citizens. So I'm going to lay this down for you right now. Strategically in your organizations, please don't underestimate what doing this is going to make to your longevity, to your ability to stay involved, to access, dare I say, the Gen Z will be the cheaper workforce because they're the younger workforce who will turn into the older workforce over time. But that younger workforce is the ones where we see that first jobs, first entrance levels, all of that. How do we make sure that we're accessing that workforce? And they're going to be a good percentage of our workforce real soon. Now, to answer the question, why do we use the term disabled and not person of determination or specially abled? So that's a question from Faye in the chat. I'll actually come off the slide deck for a second in order to talk through this one, because no use in having the Gen Z slide up. So the answer to this is that's what disabled people in New Zealand requested. So when they were doing the disability strategy for New Zealand, the government were doing the disability strategy for New Zealand, they went off and they had a conversation with the disabled persons organisations. And these are the organisations that represent people in their various areas of expertise. Sorry, in their various functional ranges. And this is where I can pause and talk about the models of disability to answer this question as well. The reason they went down that line of saying disabled people rather than person of determination or specially abled or all of those terms were they're trying to shift what disabled means in society. It's almost turning into a pride movement. And the reason is in society, we follow what we call the social model of disability. And the social model of disability says, in New Zealand, social model is where I want to end up. Medical model is where we tend to think. And the medical model says that what happens is a person is disabled by their difference or their impairment. So they are disabled by their difference or impairment. And it's that, and we look at them, they've got a medical diagnosis or they have a medical need. And as society, we're just doing our best to incorporate them, to bring them forward and to do it. So when we build that ramp, aren't we nice? We're facilitating their ability to enter the building. When we make our websites accessible, aren't we nice? We're facilitating their ability to participate in and use our website. The social model of disability flips it on its head and says that what happens is people are not disabled by their impairment or difference, but instead by the decisions that we made as a society So again, the decisions that we made as a society that prevented them from being able to participate. So when we didn't put that ramp in, we disabled the person, or we disabled wheelchair users and people with mobility impairments, and actually a few others as well. Pram users, people with carts of stuff that they need to get into the environments, etc. But when we didn't put that ramp in, we disabled that person. When we chose to build our website and we didn't think about making it accessible, we disabled all the people that use assistive technology to access the internet, people who have digital access needs. Okay, so if we frame it and we reframe it and say disabled people just have differences and needs, then just the same as you may have gender needs, you may have sexuality needs, you may have whānau needs, as in your kids are playing up or you've got challenges with things going on in your whānau. You may have religious needs. You may have cultural needs. As a society, we accept that those are all part of a person, each of those different sets of needs. What we're looking at here is disability or access needs are also just another form that makes up people. And there's a saying in the community that says disability is the one group that we can all become a part of at any point in time. Or another way of wording that is we're all just temporarily abled. So we're all temporarily abled. So the disabled persons organisations, to come back to Faye's questions, the disabled persons organisations are choosing to use and own disabled from that social model perspective and to say it's a pride movement because we are only being disabled by the decisions that you're making that don't accommodate our needs. We're very good at accommodating many needs, but we're not always good at accommodating access needs. Faye, does that answer your question? I hope it does. Okay, I'm going to come back to the slide deck. Hopefully it just jumps back to the right place. Well, it does. Good. Okay. You feel it makes it a bit uncomfortable, Faye? What we say in amongst around language.
It's makes it uncomfortable though.
Yeah. So yeah, it still makes it uncomfortable though. Are you working with Project Employ? Yeah. I believe that.
I would text based on the number of lectures held at the week.
Sorry, who was that was talking? I've just lost that for a second.
That's me. Hi, I've just gone off mute. So if it's okay that I may speak.
Sure.
We work with Project Employ and they work along with neurodiverse individuals. We've hired 2 team members and they're working well, but as it is, it takes both ends to support one another. It has been a success story, but I would be very conscious about using the word disabled out there when I'm dealing with them. That's why I'm speaking from experience, and I know I wouldn't want to single them out. We don't even use the word staff. We say team members, and we're very rigid on using team members. So while I understand the social module, you've got the point, but you've got it right. But in a colloquial setup, and as head of people and culture, I I would find it very difficult to say, hey, that's disability or that's disabled, when I have to update or encourage my team members to say, to integrate any individual from project employees. I use terms neurodivergent, I use specially abled, I use special skill set, but I find it very difficult to say this person is disabled. It's just my thought. I'm not meaning. I just struggle with these kind of things. It's
yeah, and that quite often comes up with the point of view of approaching it from that medical model. So that's it's the interpretation we have of the word disabled right now, and that's why. And what is important here is I'm talking about disabled people in the language that I use generally, but it's an individual's right to identify how they want to identify. Whether they want to identify as a disabled person, a person with a disability, somebody who is neurodivergent, deaf people. People who are congenitally deaf and NZSL users use deaf with a capital D. They don't identify as disabled. I'm talking about when I'm talking about it and when I'm writing in regards to it. However, once they're in your team, I'm hoping that you're talking about Aroha and that you're talking about John and that you're talking about, I don't know, any other million number of names that you can. So it's not that you're talking about the person in regards to them being a disabled person. You're talking about them as in, this is Aroha's needs and personalizing it to Aroha. And if we do that, we take away all of the stigma that comes with any of it because we all have needs. Sorry, Marina, did you have a...
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to tautoko what Faye was sharing. Like, everyone feels a different comfortability in using different terms. But I think what you just said, Phil, was the key thing is asking the person, how do you want to be identified? And I think you shared something at the conference we attended last week in terms of it's not that person that's in the wheelchair, that person has a name. That person is Marina or Phil or Faye, not that person over there in the wheelchair. You're more than your disability, but when you're unsure, just ask the person, just ask them, how do you want me to refer to you? And then I guess it can help to build that comfortability of how you use language, because you don't get comfortable straight away. It might be something that you lean into a little bit slowly, and it's okay to be at a different level of confidence as you go through that journey. Yeah, just my thoughts. Thank you.
No, absolutely. And I think that's bang on. It's not about us setting what terms we use. I'm using it as a colloquial full term and the official term that we would use officially. When it comes to people, then they're our team members. They're our people. They're our kamahi. And it's how do we bring that forward? Okay. Now, if there's interest, I'm happy to bring up a different slide deck and talk about language, because part of today is about going down the angles that you want to go down and talking about different things. So when I finish doing this, I do want to spend some time exploring it for you and what is right for you. I've deliberately not gone with this slide deck in a way that is going to take up the whole meeting. What the idea here is that I present and then we get into a conversation. And with that, I might be able to bring up other slide decks that we've got or cover things. But I'll just keep going. Okay, so disability advantage. If you're looking at it from a commercial point of view, this is the stats that came out of Accenture's report. Now, Accenture's a big consultancy in the States, and they said that organisations that are disability champions, disability inclusion champions, are twice as likely as others to have higher total shareholder returns than those of their peer group. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens because you stepped into this space and you actually got a productivity boost. You got a boost in many other ways to your brand's reputation, to all of the different things that go on that ended up equating to you getting a better return. You're 4 times more likely than others to have total shareholder returns that outperform those of their peer group. So if you want to take it back, if you're going back to your ELT or your SLT following this, these are the figures you start with. This is actually going to improve your performance. This is going to make a difference. And the ILO have put a report out that talks about this in regards to it. So it's called Putting the I into ESG, Inclusions of Persons with Disabilities as Strategic Advantage of Sustainability Practices for Corporates and Investors. Wow, that's a mouthful, isn't it? We had the privilege of hearing from the report's author at the conference last week. But the long story short is, if we're actually serious about being green and actually meeting our sustainability goals around delivering on green, if we're serious about delivering on our poverty goals, if we're serious about delivering on all of those areas, we cannot do it without actually addressing disability as well. Now, there's a mistake on this slide. Green decisions can also benefit disabled people, not cannot. And accessibility decisions can be green decisions. There's no reason why we can't do it. So when we're talking about the environmental pillar of ESG, so environmental social governance, in order to actually address the environmental impacts that we're having, we need to also address the financial and inequalities within society. We need to think about how we're doing things smarter, better, and all of this is impacted by disability. So this is just bringing you a little bit forward in regards to it. Social pillar, obviously we see that disabled outcomes are lower and it fits really neatly in the social pillar. But also, if we want our organisations to eventually be reflecting what's going on, we need to move people into the governance pillar and making sure that we're bringing it, and the decisions we're making at a governance structure also set back. Now, this is a long-term game because we have to do a lot of work before then, but just putting that on there. But what I do want you to think about is that if you're looking for international investors into the mahi that you're doing, then there's an increasing look from those to what we call the purple dollar. They will not, they're starting to say, what are you doing in this sense? How are you approaching this? And customers are increasingly being selective about the organisations that they work with as well. So 72% of disabled customers, according to the Purple Pound survey in the UK, would go to a different website if they could not access what they need, and then they become really highly loyal to the organisation that is meeting their needs. It's that simple. They will take their dollars, and it's billions of pounds in that survey. You feel free to look it up, Purple Pound survey, that actually go there. Also talking about the fact that ESG controversies, so when we make mistakes around, and it says ESG, but let's talk about DEI, let's talk about all of that. When we make mistakes in that space, Moody Analytics was able to quantify this, that it means over the case of a year, it can have a negative 1.3% to a negative 7.5% impact on that organisation's share price. Up to negative 7.5% on the share price when you get this wrong. Now, this does need you to have a number of mistakes in order to get to those sorts of figures, and most, if you make one mistake and you recover from it, it does come forward. But I can link that report following this. Now I'm going to keep going. So now I'm going to come to your areas of concern and just draw it back and connect it all together. So cost of living pressures. Well, one of the things that we have to do to address that as organisations is make sure that we're talking to as many of the potential customers that we have. So how do we maximise our market size and take less from more? While we think about having representative staffing, we think about having accessible products and services, and we get it right. We start with that. If you think about your cash flow constraints, it doesn't actually cost too much to start thinking about disability inclusion, especially if when you're designing a product, you put it in at the very start. If you try and retrofit in, it can become a lot more expensive. And again, people love seeing their community reflected in your organisations. So I'm making an assumption here that the cash flow constraints are related to the fact that of the cost of living crisis, the whole thing coming forward, and that's impacting on total spend of people. And so if we start to make our products available coming forwards, then we can move there. So I would argue that the return on investment, which is nominal investment, is actually significant in your bottom line. From a staff retention point of view, this was going to the question earlier, disabled people stay on average 50% longer than their non-disabled counterparts. Really depressing statistic, actually. They stay because once you've employed them, they're really grateful for the job, and they fear if they get a good working environment as to working for them. They don't always feel confident to move off to another space. But for you as employers, fantastic. You get a really loyal member who is as productive or more productive than their peers, who also is going to stay longer. They take less sick leave. We've covered that a couple of times, and are on average more productive. So from that staff retention point of view, connecting it back to your needs, doing this makes sense. From a burnout perspective, and this is an interesting one, I'd love to explore more of the reasons for this with you, why you think people are being burnt out, and if you want to put them in chat right now, feel free. But mental health is connected to so many factors, and I'm going to bring up a pyramid soon that talks about that and our ability to cope with shortfalls in our need structure and what's going on. But let's come back to that. But in the meantime, if you put anything as to why you think burnout is a challenge in chat, please do. I'd go from there. So difficulty attracting pause, Phil. Okay. Difficulty attracting higher caliber candidates is also obviously another area. We are seeing on average 80,000 people a year leave for the last few years, heading overseas, and it's our higher talented people. I've got good and bad news for you. I don't think that there's any sign of that slowing down in the foreseeable or in the immediate future. But the good news is the disabled talent pool is undertapped. And with a little bit of intent, you as a sector could actually really start to leverage off that. And there are a few organisations that we're working with, like Hind Management, which is Sedema Hotels. They are making a huge inroads in here and hiring disabled people. You'll see a few in the FMCG space, really working in this space. Your Woolworths, etc. Your banks have figured this out as well, and are actually vying for customers, for disabled customers. And I can't go into too much detail. I was hoping that Air New Zealand would have given me permission, but it hasn't come back on. I messaged them earlier to say, could I talk about it? But Air New Zealand, for instance, have looked into this as well, and we've just finished a big research project with them. And in that research project, it is actually demonstrating the size and the amount of disabled people that travel. And I can tell you it is significant. It's not out of whack with everyone else. If we actually bring that...
Sorry, Phil, we do have a couple of questions in the chat.
Yep.
There is one from Marina around being interested in how we can attract more people from disabled communities to specific hospitality and tourism roles.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And what does also benefits those without diagnosed disabilities.
Yep. Okay. Can I come back to that in just a second? Because it'll be a great one to go in 2 slides time.
Sure.
So I will definitely cover that for you. So the tourism sector, from a financial point of view, don't have stats in New Zealand, but the stats I can find say that in the Australian domestic tourism market equates to 21% of the total tourism spend, or $6.8 billion, with 12.6 million day trips of $1.8 billion in spend, and 5.9 million day trips, and 5.9 million overnight trips with a $5 billion spend. It's 21% of the total spend. On average, a little bit of a lower spend than the non-disabled component, but not phenomenally so. We're talking a couple of percentage points on average lower spend. So this is your customers. From a domestic point of view, from an international point of view, accessible tourism is getting a huge amount of things. Queensland in 2023 did a year of accessible tourism. People are waking up to this. This is just what I wanted to drag home and to drive home. And if I actually was to do it, there's one sort of figure that I want you to remember, and this comes back to so much of the earlier conversation. 100% of people, if it comes up, come on, I clicked. Here it comes. Have needs. So 100% of us, I've already talked about this earlier, 100% of us have needs. This is how we actually start to function it and get things going. And before I go on to answering the questions, this just finishes out the thoughts that we had. Unmet needs prevent people from performing at their best and prevent them from being able to engage with us as organisations. So if we're talking from a employment perspective, we have, this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs for people that know it. Psychologists have some challenges around its use, and that's because what they say is that people, it's not as straightforward to saying if you don't have your base layers there, then you can't perform at self-actualization, or you can't perform at your best. What actually comes from this is the physiological needs. This is, do I have air, food, water, shelter, clothing, and sleep? Am I sleeping? Safety and security. Do I have my health, my employment, my property, my family, and my stability taken care of? Love and belonging, friendship, family, intimacy, and connections. Self-esteem, heading into, am I feeling confident? Am I feeling like I'm achieving? Am I doing all of that? And then self-actualization goes into there. Now, my argument is every single one of us as a human being has gaps in, we might be missing that rock, we might be missing that rock, and we might be missing that rock. And we have the ability to plaster over each and every one of those. So we're happily living our lives because we've got a little bit of a gap at the moment. Maybe we were caught up in one of the recent disasters that meant that it's affected our home, but we still show up to work and we still do our job. And we've got that one that we're plastering over as well, and the love and belonging. We've got a little bit of problems at home around our family and what's going on. Maybe we're in the middle of a divorce, but we still show up and do as good a job as we can. Now, at some point, we have only so much ability to plaster over those and to fill them in and to keep ourselves going before we start to hit challenges and we start to lose our productivity, we start to lose everything. And so we go from there. So I think what's important there is to realize that everyone has needs and everyone has some weaknesses in their own area. But the more weaknesses there are and the more needs that are not being met, the less they have the ability to engage with you as employees and to meet your employment needs, and the less opportunity they have to actually come and work with you and be a part of your story, your organisation's story. So I've got some stories, but I am going to pause there and answer the questions before I go on to the stories and sharing all of that. So definitely interested in how we can attract more people from disabled communities to specific hospitality and tourism roles. How does that also benefit those without diagnosed disabilities? So first of all, this comes down to if we start to build our environments and our recruitment systems and we start to think about it so that they adjust for the person's needs, we don't care whether they've got a diagnosis or not. What we want to do is build for the 20% so that we serve the 100%. And what we need to do is start talking about disability. So one of the most important things you can actually do is bring disability into your vocabulary, bring accessibility into your vocabulary. And that is because if we say, oh, we're a company who loves diversity and inclusion and we welcome everyone to apply, it won't mean anything. Because if you're a disabled person, you've seen that written 100 times and you've applied for 100 jobs and you've been neglected from or dropped out of that role because people perceived you as broken, where in actual fact you had a lot to offer their organisations. And so we need to, on our job adverts, the very first thing you can do is say, we want disabled people here and we want neurodivergent people here. Start explicitly listing it. Okay. Next things you can do around attracting more people is think about, if we want to be strategic, without knowing the breakdown of people that we've got here on the call and the types of organisations that you're from. If you're a smaller retail environment or a smaller tourism provider, speak with one of the providers that exist out there like Workbridge, like that, and just say we want to be intentional, we want to bring somebody in, and be deliberate and bring them in. They will guide you through making it a success. You just make sure that you tell them what you want and that they don't try and put a square peg into a round hole in order to meet a thing. So you make sure that it's the right candidate for you. If it's not going to fit your needs, you say, no, find me the right candidate. They're out there. Okay? I don't want you taking anyone on who isn't going to be valuable to you, because that's going to set you back 3 years before you're willing to try again, and it's going to set the person back 3 years. So we want to find you the right candidate. If you're in a larger organization or as a sector, there are lots of sort of ideas out there about the way that you could start to really make an impact on here. And I'll give you an idea. It's called a talent compact. And this would be where you would work together to go to the tertiaries and say to them, if you give me a disabled person who is qualified, oh, we're fixing a qualification issue here, and meets this minimum pass rate and these skill sets, we will guarantee to give them a interview or a work experience or an internship or a job, whatever it is. So we negotiate. And so we get you to deliberately go to the tertiaries and say, we're stepping into this space, we want to do this. And so if you send us somebody that meets this and they approach us, we will at least hear them out and go forwards. Now, all of a sudden for the tertiaries, what's happening here is what was traditionally a harder person to place starts becoming an easier person to place. And so the consequence of that means that you, as employers, have influenced the whole change in the system, and you have empowered them to empower the tertiaries to bring more disabled people into their student base and bring things forward. Now, this is a long-term strategic move because it's going to move over time. They will have a certain percentage which you'll get in the first year, but they'll increase their disabled intake over time, and you'll start seeing more and more of that representation coming forwards. So that would be a long-term goal. Now, what that would take would be a number of providers, either in the retail or the hospitality sector, getting together and coming forward. Sorry, not retail, in the tourism or the hospitality sector. Retail's in a couple of days away. I'm sorry if I've brought that out a few times. Hospitality and tourism, and bring that forwards. Ultimately, it's about having a willingness to get somebody in. The absolute first thing that you can do is hire someone, and they'll help you adjust and bring things forward. But if you want to be strategic about it, there are many different ideas around that. We've got at the New Zealand Disability Employers Network, we call it the Accessible Recruitment Model, or arm up. So it's play on give somebody a leg up, but it's give somebody an arm up instead. And we've explored how we can make reasonable accommodations split into the process and bringing that forward. So there's lots of different things we can do here in regards to it. Ultimately, come and talk with us. We'll help you. That's our specialty, the New Zealand Disability Employers Network. It's our specialty to work with you. There's my one plug. I'll stop there and won't go further. Okay, so I'm just going to go through some of the other questions. In a team setting, how can we support a long-term loyal employee who may be experiencing cognitive or functional decline because possibly due to age or undiagnosed special needs, especially when they haven't disclosed any condition and are resistant to accepting any help, but their declining performance is affecting the rest of the team? So thank you very much for that question. A really, really interesting and not uncommon one, and actually fits one of the stories I was going to tell around people's experience and going forwards. So I was going to tell the story about Lee, who was suffering from age-related hearing loss. And Lee didn't actually understand that he was missing some of the meeting content. And so people were starting to say, oh, he's a bit of a problem. He's not adding value anymore. It's probably time for him to retire because his cognitive function's dropping a little bit. For them, what they did was they brought in a hearing screening at the organisation, and they didn't know that they were going to hit Lee when they did this. But when they brought in hearing screening at the organisation, all of a sudden they discovered that Lee's hearing had dropped. He got some hearing aids and his productivity shot back up through. And it wasn't about aiming at Lee. And I think this is probably going to help with this. It's not about doing something for Lee. It's about doing something for all your kaimahi that just happens to benefit Lee. So if you're looking at it, instead of singling the person out and saying, there's challenges with you, actually do something that benefits everyone, and then hopefully that will unlock. So I'm just reading back on this one. Loyal employee who may be experiencing cognitive or functional decline, possibly due to age, what could actually just be that they have an unmet need that means it's not actually a cognitive or functional, but it's a sensory need that means that they're reducing their ability to comprehend, especially when they haven't disclosed and are resistant to accepting help. Again, we're helping everyone, or we're doing something for everyone. We're just including them in that. It's okay also to not treat it as the word help, but actually say to somebody in their performance catch-ups, what do you need to be the best in your role? You should ask this of everyone. What do you need to be the best in your role? And so you're not saying, I want to help you fix it. You're saying, I want to make you the best person you can be. And so I'm offering you to meet those needs. And so those are the conversations you can have that change that and bring that forward. I'll just check whether Navneet's just replied. No? Okay. And then I'll go through. So Navneet, if you want to ask any further questions, please do. So interested to hear about what you suggest is the next one. At your company, I have to send, at our company, I have to send monthly reports. Part of this includes the number of disabled employees. We have people who are neurodivergent and we'd consider as disabled in line with the social model you mentioned. However, they've never formally told us. Therefore, to include them in the report, it would involve me diagnosing them, which I don't wish to do. However, by reporting 0, that is not necessarily true either. Yeah. So here's the interesting part in regards to this. Being able to measure the number of disabled people in your organisation starts with confidence. Starts with actually, I've talked about bringing disability and neurodiversity into your vocabularies, talking about building awareness. So what we want to do is we want to start getting leaders to talk about disability. We want to start getting lunch and learns on the topic around disability topics. We want to start factoring it in and making sure it's represented within our policies. That's where you're actually going to start to get people coming forward and talking about their needs and their disabilities, and you'll start to get the reporting working. It's almost a misnomer to start with how many disabled people do we have, because they have no legal thing. History says that it will be a problem with them disclosing, because they fear getting discriminated against, they fear being think of less of, they fear being the first out the door. So I was talking with, doing training yesterday where I came up with the term of the DIFO. So we know first in, first out, or last in, first out. That's quite often the way some of the systems work. If you were the first in, then you're first out because you're the most expensive, or last in, you were the last one to join the organisation, so you're less experienced, so you're the first out. Well, disabled people fear that if I'm the disabled person in the team and perceived as being less than, I will be the first out. And so there are some questions which you could use that focus on needs. They're called the Washington Group short set of questions, which ask people not about whether they're disabled or neurodivergent, but actually ask them about needs. It's those same questions that I had at the start that talked about, that we used in the census. Do you have trouble seeing even whilst wearing glasses? And they answer the different levels. And if you use those, you're asking questions about their needs, not about their impairments, if that makes sense. Or you're starting to focus in on their needs, and it is about their impairments, but you're focusing on their needs. So there's that one that might help as well. Okay, and then there was the question about are there any Queenstown-based support networks for employing people with disabilities. There are national organisations that would cover and have representation within Queenstown, not for a business network, but for placements. As a business network, the New Zealand Disability Employers Network is the national network. We bring people together. Our meetings are always so that that our organisations, our members can connect from anywhere, but not specifically. We don't have a specific Queenstown or even a specific Auckland cohort. We have a national organisation. But from the placement point of view, there is support in around that. So then there's a question from Rahul. Are we going to be emailed this minutes? Would love to share with the wider team. Absolutely. From my perspective, we'll make these slides available to Ringahora and get them to share them out with you, and any notes that that the system's taken or they want to take. I'm very happy with that. And so I think Mel's actually answered that. And this recording will also be available. So slides again, and just coming back to the question around some slight memory loss. It is observed that the person has started to have slight memory loss, and thank you for suggesting the question. We have tried this already, and the person seems reluctant by saying that I know the job and I can do it. And after multiple follow-ups, conversations, nothing seems to change. Yeah, memory loss is possibly one of the hardest areas to navigate because there can be a real defensiveness in regards to it and a real fear in regards to it. I may have to come back to you on that one. So Navneet, let me have a look at that one and speak to a couple of our partners and see whether they have guidance on how to take that specific conversation so that we can bring that forward. Okay. I think I've got through the questions. Have I missed any, Martin?
No, I think you've gone through all of them. Thank you, Phil.
Okay. So very happy to take more questions and go through that. In the meantime, whilst they're coming in, I'm just going to tell you a couple of stories. Okay. So I want to introduce you to Mel. So Mel, now, fictitious name, fictitious photo, true story. New Zealand story. So Mel has a diagnosis of attention deficit hyperactive disorder. Mel was having trouble fitting into the team that she was in and creating some real ructions in regards to it. Mel was 2 weeks away from being shown the door. She was actually being performance managed out because she didn't fit. Now, through building disability confidence and through moving things forward in regards to that, they actually were able to bring, Mel was able to talk about her needs and open up a little bit. And it turned out that she needed some noise cancelling headphones to use to overcome some things, quiet space to go in the middle of the day to refresh and recoup. And for her, an offset work time, which actually, if we're talking about hospitality, could be really important and really great, because if you're not a morning person but you're working in hospitality, well, perfect. We want people who work evenings. And so Mel, in regards to it, opened up about her needs. They made these adjustments. For Mel, she actually ended up working on global projects for this organisation. And this was somebody they were 2 weeks away from letting go because she didn't fit in with the team. This is John. John has the prosthetic leg. So John has this prosthetic leg, didn't open up to his employers about it. They didn't even know. He had a slightly different gait to his walk, but they didn't know. But for him, he had a desk-based job. His desk wasn't set up right. It was about 1.5 inches too short. And every time he sat at the desk, he was in pain. And so he had a productivity trackable role. And once they built the confidence, he opened up and talked about it. He just had taken it on. It's my problem. I'll deal with it. But he was in pain every day at his desk. Raised his desk by 1.5 inches. All of a sudden, pain gone. His productivity increased by about $10,000 per annum. So on one employee, his productivity increased by that much. For me, you don't know anything about me unless I choose to share it. You don't know that I'm ADHD inattentive. You don't know that I've had 3 prolapsed discs in my lumbar spine. You don't know that I have another neurodivergence called aphantasia where I don't visualize. You don't know anything about my anxiety that I may have had, or that I'm legally blind, not in my left eye, but in my right eye. That's a copy and paste from another one. You don't know that I've had a story through my career where I've struggled with social engagement. I was due to bullying and career challenge, the bullying that created career challenges, going through all of that. But you also don't know that I've been highly successful in roller skating. You don't know that I've had a panic attack on a plane in 2023. All of these things come together to form me. And I'm a chief executive, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a loving son. I'm all of those things. And my needs, when met, empower me to do great things. My needs, when not met, can lead to all sorts of problems and all of that. And I've discovered over my career where my career challenges have been related to the fact that I had unmet needs. And a lot of them were related to that list of things up the top there. I just didn't understand it myself. I want to tell you one more story, or 2 more stories. The most important one, this top one. Young lady working late shift at a restaurant. And I got a phone call from her father saying, where my daughter loves her job, she works at a restaurant, but she's been passed over a promotion and she's been told she's not performing, and there's some challenges coming on with her. But she succeeded in school, she was able to concentrate in school, everything was absolutely fine. Now, when I was chatting with them, it became clear to me why. And it was because this young lady was medicated. She was using ADHD medication, which helped her with her concentration and helped all of that. The problem with ADHD medication is it wears off about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and she was working hospitality in the evenings. And so she'd never thought to have a conversation with her doctor about, oh, this is wearing off. I'm not progressing in my career, so there's something going on here. And it was only through working through it that we were able to sort of just chatting with her and going through. Now, we get calls like this all the time. Most of them we stay away from, but this particular young lady we got involved with, or I helped her out and gave her those ideas. I got a call back a few months later saying, wow, what a difference it's made, work's so much happier, they're about to offer her a promotion and things are changing. So her needs and her medication weren't working for her, but that's possibly just something to think about when we're actually going with it. If a person is reporting something, it's to explore that with them. Well, okay, what's the difference? What's going on? How are we going with this? And you might just unlock a really powerful and engaged employee. Okay, so I'm not going to do the man with cognitive impairments being turned away constantly from retail, but what I am interested to hear, we're down to the last few minutes of of today. Is there any other burning questions that sit there from the people that have joined us? And thank you for those of you who have joined us and stuck with us today. How about you, Martin? Anything for you that I haven't addressed that you would like addressed?
I think you addressed most of it, Phil, already. I guess my only comment would be around accessibility. And I mean, I have spoken with several people in the past, and obviously the accessibility for the business owners in generally focusing on accessibility for people, let's say disabled people on a wheelchairs. Obviously, it's a massive customer base as well that could be untapped as well as staffing. So I do wonder that how the accessibility, or whether the business operators are fully resourced and sort of are fully how would I word it, whether they're fully resourced and have accessibility, have communicated or have sort of worked with organizations such as yours in terms of the access, I guess.
Yeah. What you've actually just brought something to my attention within this set of slides is we haven't even talked about the breadth of what accessibility is and the people that are impacted by it. I've sort of thing. Now I'm going to awkwardly bring up a set of slides. I just tried to, oh, hang on a second. I'll see whether I can get it to work the way I want it to work rather than. Okay, one moment. There we go. Excuse me for 2 seconds. So there are lots of different disabilities. We're not just wheelchair users. There are people with vision impairments, people with hearing impairments, physical impairments, neurodivergent people, people who have neurological differences, people with temporary disabilities who are still getting to use it, and people with situational. But just to quickly run you through, blindness and low vision, for instance, there's colour blindness, blindness and low vision, but people's experiences are different. So macular degeneration is where it's clouded in the front. Diabetic retinopathy talks about where there's these floaters that come around and impact different parts of the vision at times. Cataracts makes it blurry. Keratoconus, which is me on my corneas misshapen, and Marina. There's deaf and hard of hearing, but there's also tinnitus, which is that ringing. There's arthritis, cerebral palsy, multiple sclerosis, all of those. There's the different neurodiversities. It's not just ADHD and autism, dyslexia, and the ability to read your menus affects 10% of the population. Very popular in males. So much more. So and co-occurrence is the rule. People quite often, more than half of disabled people have more than one or the other. And that same thing goes for neurodiversity. And many of them you can't see. So I think in regards to it, I guess I just bring that up to talk about sometimes just having a quieter corner where people can be really beneficial. And going forwards. The secret here is not to limit yourself to thinking about one particular group, but to start to make little adjustments which are going to improve things for lots of different groups. And I agree, there's some great resources out there in regards to it from a customer perspective. If you go looking and you go searching the web. But if you want that individual advice on how to do it for your organisation, then you need to start connecting to people that are going to help you. And I think, as I talked about with the work that we did with that gentleman with a prosthetic leg, that $10,000 actually was more than the annual fee that they were paying to us in productivity gains for that employee alone. So every other productivity gain that they made after that was huge. And the same thing goes for the customer base. We can help you increase your customer base.
Fantastic. Thank you, Phil. Absolutely fascinating. I'm cautious of the time. So yeah, I think it's been great, Phil, and thanks so much for all your insights. I guess if anyone has any further questions or would like to reach out to NZDN, what would be the best way to reach out to you? If you
just go onto our website, nzden.org.nz, or email us through at info@nzden.org.nz. Very happy to address any and all questions that come in. We're definitely here to do it. So there's the website and the email address on screen now. And yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out. That's what we're here for.
Fantastic. Thank you one more time, Phil. I will close us off with Karakia. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uruta punui. Kia wātea kia māma te nāko, te tinana te wairua I te ratangata. Koiara e rongo, whakāria ake kirunga, tūturu whakamoa kia tina homi e hui e taiki e.
Kia ora, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Kia ora.